Hi, it's Mo. It is Friday, April 3rd, which means that a new weekly update started. What you will see before this update is my March wrap-up, so look out for that. I'm actually going to film that after I film this update. The first book that I finished in March is Tana French, A Faithful Place. This is the third in the Dublin Murder Squad series, and I have read 3 of them. These are the 3 that I've read. This was on the fence for me. I did a whole series audit, or all the series I'm currently working on video, and I will leave that listed down below. And this was one of the ones where I really liked the first book in the series. I enjoyed the second book in the series, but I was like, do I need to continue? I thought I was not going to like this book. I didn't have a physical copy until this year. I just picked this up at a library book sale in March. And then I was like, it's March Mystery Madness. I should read this. I got it on audio. I had to wait a little while for the audio, which is why I ended up reading it into April. And I loved it. It was great. It was very predictable, this one. The other 2, I don't think I could have predicted what was going on or the solution to the mystery, but this one was like very obvious from the beginning, I felt like. I was a little worried that they were going to throw a twist in there that they like to throw in some like British, English Isles, Ireland mysteries that I have read before, but they didn't, which I was happy about. Although it kind of does leave it hanging, and I wonder if that was intentional. Intentional in that you could think that that might be true, which it could have been, or if it was that they know that that's a commonly used trope in a lot of these mysteries, so they left it open as like a possible red herring, possible, you know, makes you think of those mysteries. But either way, I really enjoyed it. I mean, these books are so long. You know me, I do not read long books. This book is over 420 pages, and I flew through it. This one I read on audio, the second book I read on audio, the first book I read physically, and I read it in like a day and a half. The writing is just so compelling. If you are unfamiliar with the Dublin Murder Squad series, this is a series of books that all revolve around different cops and their different jobs as cops who come into contact with this Dublin Murder Squad, which is just what it sounds like, a squad of cops who deal with murders. So in the first book, we're dealing with like a hotshot young murder squad person who's like worked his way up, and he's definitely, you know, solidified his role in the murder squad. That's Detective Ryan. And then his young partner Maddox, who he works with, and they're kind of dynamic on the job and off the job. And then the second book follows Maddox when she is in undercover, not in the murder squad. And then this book follows Mackie, who is her head person, her detective in undercover. So like they're all connected to each other. The next book is a detective that's in this book, and then the next book is a detective that's in this book, and back to Mackie. It's all like connected, and it's all having to do with similar things, but it's their different individual stories, and each story, I'm finding out, has something to do with the current crime, but also something that connects that crime to the main character's past. So in the first one, it was a mystery revolving around Detective Ryan's past. In the second one, it was a mystery revolving around one of Maddox's undercover jobs. In this one, it's dealing with Maddox's past again and his current life. These are all just, they're so great. They're so fun. So in Faithful Place, we meet Detective Maddox. We see that he's divorced from his wife, that he is just gripping on to his weekends with his daughter, trying to balance work and life. Work in undercover, which is so unpredictable, so hard, so much that you can't tell your family about or tell anyone in your life about. And then like having an actual life and rearing his daughter and like maintaining some relationships that he has. But this is all disrupted when the one person who he still has contact with from his family, the rest of which he's estranged from, calls him back into the family, and what he finds there dredges up his past, his history with his family, and of course a case that he needs to solve. So yeah, really enjoyed this one. So good. Loved it. This is the only book that I finished so far in April. I'm also reading Mr. Loverman by Bernardine Evaristo. This is my TBR spin pick for March. I put this off because I was reading Beloved, which you'll know from these videos, which was also for a TBR spin, but it was for the 2025 TBR spin. Reading that book twice kind of was unexpected for me, and I didn't feel like I could read another TBR spin book at the same time, so I did start this. And then I also started My Heart is a Chainsaw, which I am loving and I'm flying through, and I wish I was reading right now, honestly. So that's my little update for my reading. My father's birthday is next week, so I think we're gonna try and take him out for dinner this weekend. I met up with a friend whose birthday is also next week. He's going on a cruise for his birthday, which is so fun. And we went to a cafe that I told him about and he was craving, so we went there. So I haven't seen him in a couple of months, so it was really nice to see him and catch up and have a good breakfast. When I read some more, I'll let you know. I've talked about this before, but every year with all the books that I've read, once I'm finished reading them, I put them on this shelf, which is next to my desk in my library. That is my yearly read shelf. All the physical books that I've read throughout the year. As the year goes on, it gets more and more full. And one of my favorite things to do is put the books there when I'm done reading them at the end of the month. It is April 6th. It's the end of this weekly update. What did we do? We did a lot of stuff. We had dinner with my dad. On Saturday, we went out to a fairly new restaurant around us, which is like an Asian fusion raw bar restaurant. I mean, we live at the Jersey Shore, so a lot of restaurants are like that, but this one was pretty good. I was not immediately impressed because my dad got oysters and the first oyster was not right. There was shell in it, which we all know is a bad thing. I personally don't eat oysters, but being in the service industry, obviously I know what you're supposed to get when you get oysters, and getting bits of shell is not it. So I was like, uh-oh, this is gonna be nerve-wracking. I'm not gonna like this dinner, but then I did end up liking it. It was a little bit pricey, but not as expensive as it could be. And you know what was great about this restaurant actually was that they asked what your dietary restrictions are and what your allergies are right at the beginning, and then when I said we were vegetarian, they gave us a whole bunch of options that they could do that were off menu. So I thought that was fantastic and lots of points for them. So that is Xena in Bradley Beach. There's also the same restaurant, I think, in Tom's River. My friends James and Alyssa told me about the Tom's River one. Then they opened the Bradley Beach one, I think, last year. So that was fun. My husband's been continuing with his drone journey. So we've been going to the park a lot and walking around and doing that, which is fun. You know, you could definitely be part of it. Although last night we went to the park kind of late and we were there past twilight or past sunset, and it was a little spooky because there was no one else around, and it was also spooky because I was reading My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones all day, and so I was in the horror slasher mindset, and walking through the dark woods was pretty freaky. I did not even take any footage because I was like, well, if I have my phone out, I'm definitely gonna get murdered. I did come home and finish My Heart is a Chainsaw. So this is the second book that I've read so far in April, and I absolutely love this book. I've only read 2 of Stephen Graham Jones's longer works, which were this and The Only Good Indians. I've read The Only Good Indians twice. I read it once on audio and once physically, and I love it. It's probably one of my all-time favorite books now, maybe my most favorite horror, and I really, really liked My Heart is a Chainsaw as well. I loved it, but similar to... Who's saying that? Well, it's not... Is it Andre? Is that you saying that, Andre? Where was I? Similar to The Only Good Indians, it took me a while to get into this one. I think that Stephen Graham Jones's longer writing, each book has a very specific style and cadence and way of narrating the book. they're all very conversational. They're all very realistic, talking in your head or speaking to other people. But it's hard to get used to that when you're reading a book. Like, most books are not written in that inner monologue style, and his books are. It took me a little while to get into this, and I will say that this book is too long. My major flaw with this book is that it is just over 400 pages, or just under 400 pages, 398 in this edition. There's a lot of setup. There's a lot of covering ground that, I don't know. I can't describe it. It's like he covers ground, not that's already been covered. He's not like rehashing things. He's not like restating things necessarily, but you get the idea. Let me tell you the premise of this book. The premise of My Heart is a Chainsaw is that we follow Jade Daniels, who is a high school senior. She is getting ready to graduate. She is the black sheep of their whole town of Proof Rock. She is a troublemaker. She doesn't get along with her parents. She lives with her father, but they have a very adversarial relationship. She hates him, and seemingly he hates her as well. She doesn't talk to her mom, even though her mom lives very close and works at the local dollar store. She is adversarial with the townsfolk. She's adversarial with the school. She's constantly doing pranks. She loves her history teacher, but even her history teacher is making her do all this extra credit because she isn't in school enough, or she's not doing the project that she should be doing, so she ends up doing extra credit for him. She works as a custodian in the town and in the school, which is kind of sponsored by like the town sheriff, who again, she has a tumultuous relationship with, even though he kind of has a soft spot for her. So in the very beginning of this book, we start with, I mean, it is a slasher. It is a horror book. We start with some deaths of some peripheral people. And then we're not sure like what the meaning of that is and what we're supposed to think about that. But in the first chapter, we meet Jade and we see what her situation in the town is, and then there is an incident that sends Jade away for a few weeks, and when she gets back, she's still this person, this ostracized person, this outsider. Stop being a bad boy. One of the things that Jade does to make herself feel safe and to comfort herself is to watch slasher movies, and what she's praying for, what she's hoping for, what she's wishing for is that a slasher will happen in her town. And she has her motivations for this, but right off the bat, we know that Jade is not necessarily a reliable narrator. We don't know whether we can trust Jade's perception or her judgment on things. We do know that we can trust her knowledge of slashers, and interwoven with the chapters of this book are her extra credit works, her papers that she has given to her history teacher about slashers. So we know that she really knows her stuff, but she is not reliable in that, like, we're just not sure what her grasp of reality is. But as the book progresses and as Jade's senior year progresses, all signs point to that a slasher is happening in town. And that's all you really need to know about this book. It's about a young outsider who wishes for a slasher and may be caught up in a slasher. Something that Jade is looking for is the characters in a slasher. So she's looking for, yes, the slasher himself and the culprit, but she's also looking for the final girl. She's also trying to identify the blood sacrifice, which happens at the beginning of a slasher. And she's telling us all about these things, so we're learning about slashers with her. So it's a really interesting book. I really liked it. You get to know Jade. She's not a wholly likable character. You get to know other characters in the town who all have flaws. Many of them you feel for, and we see why Jade is the way she is throughout this book. So we learn a lot about Jade's past, and we learn a lot about what she's keeping inside and what has made her this ostracized person in town. I think ultimately this book is about the things we do to comfort ourselves, the solace we take in things, the way we confront or do not confront our past, and the roadblocks or, again, comfort that we put in the way of that. Like, how how can you deal with a past that is undealable, and what do you need to do? How do you construct the world around you to be able to live when you feel completely different and outside and other than everyone else? Jade is really looking for that comfort, and she's really seeking that comfort in her relationship with people, but mostly in her isolation, and how she connects with the world is through slashers. And that's a big part of it too, like how you can connect with people when you don't trust anyone or anything, and how you can trust something to make you be able to live in the world, to be able to survive the world and what's going on in it. There's a lot of themes, there's a lot to discuss, there's a lot to think about, but there's also a slasher aspect and possibly a supernatural aspect, possibly a indigenous religion or indigenous belief aspect, because Jade is half Indian. Her dad is full Indian. There's all these things and you don't really know what is happening, but you are along for the journey with Jade. My flaws with it are that it is too long. It definitely could have been cut down by, I would say like 50 pages. Not much, but like making this a 350 page book, cutting out or condensing some of Jade's extra credit work would have been nice, I think, because that you do get a little bogged down in that. And I do think that the way the language is written in this and the way that you are constantly reading from Jade's perspective and inside her head, and the cadence of her voice, her internal voice, just made it kind of long, whereas you could have, I think, made it a little bit easier for the reader and cut that down a bit. Although you are told a lot about slashers, I'm a person who has not watched the big slashers. I've never seen Halloween. I've never seen Friday the 13th. I've never seen the vast majority of these movies. I think the only movie that they talk about that I've seen and rewatched is Scream and Jaws. So like they talk a lot about Scream and Jaws, but they talk a lot about Friday the 13th. They talk a lot about Nightmare on Elm Street. Never seen it. You know, the flaw I don't think is that they talk about them so much. The flaw is I think that they partly spoil them, which doesn't matter for someone like me who doesn't care. But if you are on your slasher journey and like Stephen Graham Jones wants you to be on your slasher journey, this might ruin some things for you. So I think that's a little bit of a flaw. And then I do think that the ending was very rushed. There weren't answers at the end that you wanted, which is fine. If we're following this like we would follow a slasher, yes, the majority of the bad things are going to happen in the very end. The majority of questions that you have and places where you needed to suspend your disbelief are not going to be answered, are not going to be resolved, are not going to be fixed, right? There's going to be flaws in the slasher that you're never going to learn. That was fine. I don't know, it almost started a new arc at the end of this book that, I don't know, doesn't get resolved. Like at the end of a slasher, you should at least have a denouement of like, okay, here's where they are now. Maybe at the very, very last thing, there's like some question, some new thing, an end piece that's going to lead you to the next in the series, right? Oh, Jesus Christ, Martin, scared the shit. To the next book in the series, to the next film in the series, to the comeback. But I don't think this had that. I think it like had something else. And I think that some of the very end pieces were supposed to be like an aha moment. We're supposed to be like, oh, this is the significance of this, which it was, but it was maybe even a little heavy-handed. I don't know. So I do think there were flaws with this, but I did love it, and I can't wait to read the rest in the series. I looked immediately on Libby to see if they were available, and they are not, because I don't have physical copies of the next two in the series, but hopefully I will find them soon. And that was my week for the first week in April. Very excited to have read 2 books in April so far, and kind of long ones, right? Long for me anyway. So let me know how your first week of April went. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I mentioned here. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.